Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the News Today edition of 17th of April, wherein we pick up all important news for the day and explain to you simply from the examination perspective. So let's look at the important topics which we're going to cover today. First, here is ISRO has released a report with the name of Indian Space Situational Awareness Report for 2025. Then there has been a study which has highlighted that how exactly tropical cyclones over oceans are experiencing something called as marine heat waves, which are far more destructive. Then a new development has happened in the domain of AI in governance, wherein AI governance and economic group has been constituted to lead India's national AI governance strategy. And then India's first chip fabrication plant has been notified at a special economic zone in Dholera, Gujarat. We are also going to see certain quick updates for the day along with place in news, that is Lebanon. So the very first news here is कि ISRO has released a report, that is Indian Space Situational Awareness Report for 2025. Basically, it is an annual report released by ISRO which talks about the space situation across countries. So again, it is highlighting two aspects with respect to how and what are the developments at a global space level from ISRO's perspective, and then what were the developments which were done by Indian space in the domain of this, and then what are the commitments of India as a leader in the space technology as well. So all these things are covered in this particular report. As far as prelims examination is concerned, maybe they can ask you that they'll give the name of the report, that is Indian Space Situational Awareness Report for 2025, and they can ask you few facts which we are going to discuss, along with which body releases that report. Is it released maybe yearly, monthly, quarterly? So all such aspects are important as far as prelims examination recently is concerned. Now, as per this particular report, it has talked about the global scenario, what has been the developments around space across the globe. Number one here is this year, of course, 2025 marks a record launch which has been done in the space domain. So we have at least maybe launched 315 out of 328 successful launches have been done in this year, and we have placed 4198 known operational satellites. That is one major achievement of last 1 year as per ISRO. Then there has been a lot of lunar explorations. Initially, lunar explorations was limited to intervention by government agencies, but now private sectors are also included in lunar exploration. And there has been an example wherein 4 lunar missions in 2025, and all were done by the private players. Example mission, Blue Ghost Mission 1, which has become the first privately owned spacecraft to successfully soft land on moon. Again, they can give you questions like this: Blue Ghost Mission 1, and they can ask you few facts about them in the prelims examination, right? It is a privately owned and it has landed safely on moon. It is private body, number one. Then it has also talked about that there are so many amount of satellites in the space that it has caused something called as space congestion. Just like in India or maybe across the world, what we are seeing, that again with huge population, people are having more vehicles, and that is leading to traffic congestion. In a similar manner, there are many satellites back in the space, and that has lead to something called as space congestion. And what is the problem with this? Because here we have basic traffic management rules, but many times it has found that many of the satellites have very limitedly, they have maybe escaped the collision which could have happened, and that has been the idea. So this report has highlighted that space congestion, and there is a risk which is associated with it. So high close, approximately, let's for example 1,60,000 is the amount of satellites in congestion, especially in the lower Earth orbit. This is an orbit where again major of the imaginary satellites of countries are being placed. So this is something with respect to the global scenario. Then with respect to Indian space scenario, what has been our achievement in last 1 year, it has talked about that 144 spacecraft including the private spacecraft operators and academic institutions have been launched by India. And very important, that is GSLV F-15 NVS-02, that is the 100th launch of an Indian launch vehicle, which has happened at Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sriharikota. That is very important. They can ask you questions because it was the 100th launch. So these kind of maybe 100 years, 50 years, and something like that becomes important for an examination. Then there has been a number of operational satellites. Again, as far as India is concerned, they are talking that 22 satellites are there in the lower Earth orbit, and 31 are there in the geosynchronous orbit, that is IDEA. Then there have been deep space vision missions which have been there in the name of Chandrayaan-1. We have got Chandrayaan-2 orbiter, and then the Aditya L1 in the sun, right? So that is the basic idea of deep space missions of India. Then what has been key milestones which have we achieved in last year is, number one, space deck. Again, very important mission wherein we are trying to find out that how exactly voyage of Indian astronauts are going to happen. Then we have also found out that again the Axiom 4 crewed mission which was sent to International Space Station, Captain Sudhanshu Shukla was one of the crew members, and this is where achievement of India lies in the domain of space as per the ISRO report. Then India has also done few commitments that again, of course, that in international space area, there are debris which are also collected due to the satellites, and India has committed itself that then we are going to stop the debris by 2030. So again, that is commitment to debris-free space missions. So again, it was declared in the year 2024, and we are going to end it by 2030. That is the basic idea. Then there has been a lot of indigenous efforts which has been done by India in order to track down its space area, right? Just like CCTV are there for monitoring the traffic congestion in the cities, just like that, we have certain thing which is monitoring back thing happening at the space. One of them is network for space objects tracking and analysis, NETRA, very important. These three initiatives are very important as far as the upcoming prelims examination is concerned. Then multi-object trapping radar at Sriharikota. Then we have Baker-Nunn Schmidt telescope, which is currently being refurbished at Nainital. So all these initiatives are done, which are very important for your upcoming prelims examination. And then we have been participating in the global fora for Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee and IAA Space Debris Committee, which is again targeting to commitment of India for a debris-free space. So as far as examination is concerned, in your mains examination, you have a specific topic of developments in the domain of space technology. So in questions wherein they can ask you that maybe trace down the evolution of India in the space sector, you can quote these kind of datas and you can quote the report which has released by ISRO. As far as your prelims examination is concerned, I have discussed initially that how exactly questions could be framed from the set of news which we have discussed over here, right? Okay, moving to the second news, that is tropical cyclones have been experiencing something called as marine heat waves, which are far more destructive. Heat waves altogether in the news these days because we are expecting heat waves in our country, and there is a recent report which has been released which talks about that how many cities in India is going to face severe heat waves in the upcoming seasons or upcoming months. So this is where all of you must have read about tropical cyclones. So tropical cyclones itself are very destructive in nature. Now imagine that if I am telling that due to this marine heat wave, the intensity and destruction of these tropical cyclones are going to get increased. And this is where this study has highlighted that how marine heat waves basically are happening in the land maps, what we have read till now. But now heat waves are also leading to maybe increasing temperatures of water in the oceans, and that has led to intensifying the tropical cyclones which are going to happen. And this is where this study has highlighted it. So as per the study, it has told that in such a scenario, it is going to create destruction which is 60% more $1 billion $1 disasters, and due to this heat wave influence that has been discussed. Now, this marine heat waves enhances the maximum sustained wind speed. Magar, of all of you must have seen that again, the tropical cyclones, we have a specific wind speed. Due to this heat wave scenario, the wind speed of a tropical cyclone is increased by 20%, right? And they promote very heavy precipitation up to 12% higher, and that is leading to the destruction capacity which is associated with this heat wave associated tropical cyclone. So now let's understand what exactly are these marine heat waves. So heat waves are something which you have heard that, again, of course, with the intensity of heat falling and heating the ground, again, that is where the temperatures are rising. So similar thing is happening at an ocean level as well. So basically, whenever, again, very important facts that how can we classify a marine heat wave, what are its characteristics and what are the specifications. So it occurs when the surface temperature of the particular region of a sea is increasing by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, very important, above the average temperature for a time period of at least 5 continuous days, and that is a basic idea. This is a situation wherein we can call that we are having a marine heat wave in a particular region in the ocean. That's a basic first criteria, right? And it can last for approximately for weeks, months, or even years. And we have seen a pattern that since 1982, the incidences of marine heat waves have doubled, which has shown that it is no longer a very once in a blue moon kind of a phenomena. It is happening very frequently. And this frequent happening of marine heat waves is again associated with the kind of intensified tropical cyclones which we can experience, right? So that's a basic idea. So then what are the impacts? Let's say if we are having marine heat waves, so what kind of impact it can create? So they can ask you questions in prelims examination like this. You consider the following statements regarding the impact of marine heat waves. What can happen if temperatures are rising? So of course, the marine organisms who are maybe adapted to a specific temperature, they will of course move from that particular region. The fishes or many other marine creatures who are staying, who are maybe sustaining themselves at a specific temperature, it are going to move out. Then there will be more such scenarios, for example, that the shift in population of marine species, depression in the fish ecosystem, then there are certain species which cannot move in the water. Example are corals, algae and sponges, and they are more prone to extreme stress. We have seen the incidence of coral bleaching due to increased temperature rise. So all such scenarios are going to happen with this marine heat waves. And lastly, there will be exacerbation of harmful algal blooms, and increased likelihood of extreme weather events. That is the ideas of tropical cyclones getting intensified. Then let's look at that. What are the major causes of marine heat waves which are happening over the sea, right? So 3 conditions are there. Number 1, of course, here is that the surface heat flux. What exactly is surface heat flux? So if at a region there is a high pressure which is above the water, of course, for a extended period of time, so that is leading to heating of water, and this is a situation called as surface heat flux, right? So this has led to shallower and shorter in duration. So they are very short duration. If these kind of heat waves are happening, marine heat waves, they are a very shorter duration. As and when the high pressure area gets it gets lessened down, then again we are going to fall back to the normal situation. Then second is advection. What is advection? We'll see that the temperature of water is getting regulated vertically through the process, something called as advection. So this is again a situation wherein maybe the movement of warmer waters into the region, because you must have read in the topic of ocean currents that again how the global ocean temperature is getting regulated by movement of cold and hot ocean currents. So this is also leading that again maybe the ocean currents are the ones who are making the water temperature increase in a in-depth manner, deeper and longer in duration. And of course, the third criteria, the third cause of course here is the climate change, because climate change is leading to the rising of global temperatures, and that is again leading to the incidences of marine heat waves. So that's the basic criteria. I'll explain it to you through an example that what is a normal condition and how exactly these heat waves are impacting. So in a normal condition, you must have experienced that again the wind speeds are good, cloud cover is scattered, sunlight is happening. So again, this is leading to what? Evaporation and outgoing long wave radiations. And here there's a very strong mixing of water happening. That is, the warm water is coming down, up, cold water is going up, and that's how the temperature of water is getting regulated. Even if the upper layers are getting heated, it gets regulated by the strong mixing of water happening over here. Then in a marine heat wave condition, what is happening? That again the wind speeds are getting reduced. We have a weaker winds. Then the cloud cover are quite lower. Maybe we have a lower cloud cover, and that is leading to what? Maybe increased solar heating. Here we have solar heating, here we have a increased solar heating, and that is leading to decreased evaporation, and high outgoing long wave radiations are happening. Due to this, what we are having? Increased advection. That is, here the mixing of water was happening in a very strong manner. Here, due to this condition, the mixing of warm and cold water is very less, and that's how you can see how maybe the waters are getting heated, and this is a situation called as a marine heat wave situation, right? We have discussed the causes. Now, with respect to that, again, as I am discussing that marine heat waves is going to intensify the tropical cyclones. So let's discuss very briefly about what are tropical cyclones. So tropical cyclones are violent storms which are originating over the oceans in the tropical areas. That's why the name, of course, tropical cyclones. And they move to coastal areas by bringing about a large scale destruction by violent winds, heavy rainfall and storm surges. I think most of you must have read that. And these tropical cyclones are known by different names in different ocean waters. For example, they are called as cyclones which are originating in the cyclones originating in Indian Ocean. Then Atlantic Ocean, they are called as hurricanes. In the Western Pacific and Southern China Sea, they are called as typhoons. And Willy Willies are in the Western Australia region. All these names are very important for your upcoming prelims examination. There are a few conditions which need to be satisfied in order for a tropical cyclone to get developed. So what are these conditions? Number one, a large sea surface temperature within higher than 27 degrees Celsius. That is number one condition. Then presence of Coriolis force. So again, Coriolis force you must have read, and that's why we are not going to find cyclones happening at equator, because at equator Coriolis force is 0, and that's why we do not have any cyclones happening around the equator. That's one of the reasons. Then there has to be a small variations in the vertical wind speed happening. Then of course a pre-existing weak low pressure region has to be created, or a low level cyclonic circulation, and then there has to be an upper divergence, which you must have read, upper divergence above the sea level system. So these are the 5 conditions which are favorable conditions for development of a tropical cyclone. So the entire news was about how exactly we are going to see intensified tropical cyclones due to the effect of marine heat waves. And that's where an important message which is being discussed over here is that how important it is to see and fight climate change happening in our country, across the globe, right? That's the one major thing. Then the next topic here is a very important development has happened, maybe many a times, which we have discussed about artificial intelligence, its impact, how artificial intelligence is going to be included in the domain of governance in the country. Now, until now, we were having a very scattered policy making. We did not had any single one body which was able to discuss that how exactly AI is going to be implemented in India. So what we have done is we have created a interministerial group which is going to be headed by a specific body, which is going to altogether see the entire applications and functioning of artificial intelligence in our country. Now, the name, of course, here is AI Governance and Economic Group, which is constituted to lead India's National AI Governance Strategy. So until now, what we have seen that we have always talked about artificial intelligence. Niti Aayog, in one notes of in its report of 2018, it talks about AI for all. It means that AI should not only benefit the big corporate people, it should be, or maybe AI should be implemented in a democratic manner in a country, so that everyone could be using these technology as and when they that in the domain respective to their choice, right? So that's an idea of AI for all. And then we also had this AI ecosystem through India AI mission. So until now, we government have been launching such things, but we did not had any concrete AI body which is going to oversee the entire implementation process of artificial intelligence in our country. Then we have also seen under India AI mission, we had 7 sutras that how exactly AI should be implemented in our country in a democratic manner. Those 7 sutras are very important for your prelims examination. What are those? Number one, trust, that people should trust that AI. Then the AI should be people centric. Very simple. It should be a responsible innovation. Then equity should be created, accountability, understandability, and safety, resilience, and sustainability. These are 7 sutras around which India AI mission is being based, at how exactly we are going to democratically or maybe apply artificial intelligence in our country. And then we have also have a strategy that, again, all of you know about digital public infrastructure. So example, we have Aadhaar, we have different other online digital infrastructure. So this is where we are trying to integrate artificial intelligence in those existing digital infrastructures of India. That is one of a kind which India is going to have, right? So again, with integration with the existing DPIs and building institutional architecture like AI governance group. So this is a basic idea. That is something which we have been following as of now. Now what has changed? That is very important to discuss. So now this new ministry has been formed because the India AI mission and maybe the guidelines or India AI guidelines which we have been following till now, it has always emphasized that, again, AI is not a singular thing. It is going to impact every sector in the economy, starting from health, defense, education, infrastructure, everywhere. So it has to be a coordinated effort by all different ministries of the government, right? So that is where that was the one major thing, that again the AI guidelines always emphasize that we need to have a whole of government approach for AI governance. And then the recent economic survey has also highlighted that, again, India has a very unique labor market system. You must have seen a major concern which people are having with respect to AI and its impact on economy is with respect to job losses. And this is where labor market is going to be the one which is going to be on the receiving end of this artificial intelligence. Economic survey again has highlighted that the need for a central authority, that we need to have a single central authority to align AI deployment with India's unique labor market realities and social stability. That's the basic idea, and this is where the artificial intelligence governance and economic group, which has been constituted under Ministry of Information, Electronics and Information Technology, which has formalizes the recommendation of these two things which we have discussed, right? So now what we have done is we are going to have one single body as of now, because until now there was no dedicated government agency or an institution which was going to regulate the impact of artificial intelligence across different sectors of the economy. And that's why we have created this single institution, that is interministerial group, with the name of Artificial Intelligence Governance and Economic Group. It is a high level interministerial body, means it is coming under as a maybe a super set of all different ministries. So that's the meaning of interministerial body, that will serve as a central institution and mechanism for AI governance, policy development and coordination. So what exactly is the framework of this? So again, this group is going to be a 10-member group. So in this 10-member group, again coming under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So it will be, of course, it is going to be a high-level interministerial constituted by MeitY. So chairman will be, of course, the Minister of Electronics and Information Technology, and the vice chairman will be Minister of State, Electronics and IT. Then there are 8 other members. As I discussed, the group will consist of 10 members across them. 2 of them are these, chairperson and deputy vice chairperson, and then 8 members will be picked up from across policy, science, security, economic affairs. Why this policy, science, security, economic affairs? Because all of these are going to give their inputs with respect to AI in governance, because it has a multi-dimensional let's say impact which is going to be created in the economy. So again, the other members will be from these specific fields. It will have the principal scientific advisor of India, then the chief economic advisor of India, and then the CEO of Niti Aayog. Then apart from that, it is going to be given an expert opinion by this Expert Support Technology and Policy Expert Committee, that is TPEC. So again, this body is going to give its opinion, because AI is not only getting developed in our country, it is of course developing across the globe. So what are the developments or research happening at a global level with respect to AI? What kind of regulatory gaps we are having? What kind of challenges we might face? Again, with respect to giving tech-based recommendations by studying applications and maybe things around artificial intelligence happening across the globe, this body is going to give input to the group. That is the basic idea. That's overall and a very important domain and a development with respect to how we are, as a country, we are going to have a single institution that is going to be an inter-ministerial group, which is going to formulate and oversee the entire applications of AI in our country. A very important development. Then what are the work around which it is going to be done is, number one, it is going to coordinate AI policy across ministers. We have discussed. Then again, what is going to be national AI governance initiatives across public and private sectors. Everything is going to be done by this particular body. Then promote responsible AI innovation. Again, working around the 7 sutras which we have discussed, right? Study emerging AI risk, regulatory gaps, develop India's national position and strategy on AI governance, then access labor market impacts of AI adoption, and classify AI use cases as deploy, pilot or defer. That's a basic work which this body is going to do. The next topic here is, again, until now we have seen that whenever we talk about semiconductors industry, India is trying to make sure that again we are self-sufficient enough in this specific sector. Until now we were only having the assembly thing which was being done by India. We did not had any fabrication set up in our country. So now for the very first time, a very important development across the domain of semiconductor manufacturing in our country is we are setting up a new plant in Dholera, Gujarat, which is going to be India's first chip fabrication plant, which is notified at a special economic zone. We are going to discuss what are special economic zones and what is chip fabrication. Right. So we have seen that in terms of AI-enabled semiconductor fabrication facility. So again, it is being developed by Tata Semiconductor Manufacturing Private Limited. That is a very important thing, number one. And then what is fabrication, first of all? So again, we have discussed that until now, India was dependent on the semiconductor, the fabrication from different countries. And we have seen in 2020, we have faced this COVID-19 and major, maybe of course, this whole global economy was facing some kind of a problem, interconnectedness were again a challenging situation, and that's where we faced, let's say, import issues with respect to this semiconductor assembly. And that's where we, and again, before that as well, of course, we had an idea of Make in India and Atmanirbharta by 2047. All of these have aligned that again we need to go for fabrication in our own country itself, and let's lessen our dependency on from other countries. So what exactly is this fabrication method? So let's discuss. So fabrication is basically that again this was something which we were importing, and then these chips were assembled in India. So from this process, we had the semiconductor facility in our country. We did not had these facilities in India, and that's why this fabrication setup plant, which is going to make India self-sufficient in that particular domain. So what is exactly fabrication? So exactly fabrication is what? Making of this chip. So this is where, of course, how a chip gets manufactured, very briefly, not important for you to get into the technical domain, but just to make you understand. This is basically a silicon wafer, right? So it is very light silicon material, and then we are etching circuits over that with the help of UV light and photo masking, and then these circuits are getting made, and this is how finished chip is getting manufactured. So this is where a very, very, very important development in the semiconductor industries of India. So what will be its benefit? Number one, strategic autonomy. So again, we are going to lessen dependency on import of these manufactured chips, because now we will be manufacturing our chips own. That's why through this fabrication plant, and because we have seen that how important semiconductors are across these fields of defense, telecommunications, and automotive technologies, then this plant, of course, if plant is there, it is going to create job, but not just any ordinary job. High skilled jobs are going to be created with the setting up of this particular plant. Approximately 21,000 jobs are going to be created. Then technologically, because until now we're only doing assembly wala kaam, but now we are going to fabricate it. So moving from assembly, testing, marking, and packaging to fabrication places in India, which is again, India is entering into a domain where again there are only few countries which are having plants which are doing the task of fabrication of chips. So India is one of those countries, right? So, and that is where we have seen, and the government, of course, is going to create a very good semiconductor ecosystem through this special economic zones, and of course it is going to place India as a global hub for electronics and chip manufacturing. Now, what exactly are these special economic zones and how they are functioning? Because special economic zones are special zones which are again in the territory of India, but again they are given some kind of a special status. So mostly what we have seen, that what kind of changes have been brought in the special economic zone category of in India was that it is where these are designated areas in a country that operate under a distinct regulatory and fiscal framework. They have tax exemptions, they have different kind of let's say some kind of a relief which are being given to them to promote trade and investment. Basically everything which is getting manufactured in the special economic zones are primarily were used for export purpose only. But now certain changes have been brought in. What are those? So we have made certain amendments in 2025 in the special economic zones rules of 2006, that we have made sure that these rules are going to attract investment, foster innovation, and enhance ease of doing business in our country. So initially, for a special economic zone to be set up in our country, the land requirement, the minimum land requirement was 50 hectares, which has now been reduced to 10 hectares. Example, that now because semiconductor industries are basically very small, they do not require a big land for that. So again, this is going to help for setting up of special economic zones for even semiconductor factories and manufacturing plants. And then they are also, again, as I have discussed initially, under special economic zone, we had the rule was ki the products which were getting manufactured were only used for export purposes. But now what we have done over here is ki anything which is getting manufactured from special economic zone, they are going to be paying the customs duty, which are of course of the Indian market, and then those products can enter into Indian market as well. Why initially had this condition that again from special economic zones we are only going to give export? Why? Because there are different companies which are manufacturing same goods in the country. If those special economic zones good which are getting certain support from the government, they also enter into the Indian market, they are going to distort the fairness or competitiveness in the market, right? Of course, the special economic zone product will get an edge over the same product which is being manufactured by any other company in the country. But now this Again, the condition here is that you are going to pay the tariff, domestic tariff area, and then on payment of duties from those special economic zones, products can also enter into Indian market. A very important development and a very important thing for your examination, both for prelims and mains. Then we are going to see the place in news, that is Lebanon, the entire West Asia, very important for your upcoming examination. Please see, I think many of you must have read that as well. But Lebanon was in news. Why? Because a 10-day ceasefire deal has been agreed between Lebanon and Israel, right? So Lebanon capital is Beirut. So again, just locate them in the map. Again, locate it is region, of course, in West Asia, bordering countries, then the geographical features, just see about them. Every country over here with the current developments happening over here, very, very important for your upcoming examination. Then we have certain quick updates. Number one here is the state of India's bat report. Again, bats, they are a type of mammals. So you must have read it in environment and ecology. So a survey has been conducted. So India's first bat assessment survey, which has highlighted the threats and the data gaps which has been observed in the way this report has been made. So one, this report has prepared by Nature Conservation Foundation and Bat Conservation International. Again, a fact for your prelims examination. And they have talked that India has about 135 bat species and 16 of them are endemic. What is meaning endemic? They are only found in this particular region only. Then 7 species of bats are there in the IUCN threatened category, and major threats which are included to bats in our country are urbanization, you must have seen that, deforestation, climate change, and stigma, which is associated, because initially we told it was, of course, there key bats were the primary carriers of this COVID-19 virus, right? Then bats and mammals, they are basically mammals, and they are the only ones who are capable of true powered flight. They can fly. They use echolation to navigate and herd in darkness. Sound, they have a sound frequency and they can travel in, of course, navigate and hunt at then dark system. And then they provide ecosystem services like pollination, pest control, and seed dispersal. Fact hai, species bats, very important. Just look around the thing, because species which are there in news, they become as a question in your prelims examination. Then next here is World Anti-Doping Agencies. Again, we have seen that again, around the world, we want to make the sport doping free. So India also wants to have a doping free sport, and that's why it has been a strong supporter of World Anti-Doping Agency. That India has strengthened the global anti-doping cooperation at WADA, right? So basically this WADA, again, facts hai, just remember it for your prelims examination. This is established in the year 1999 as per the Lausanne Declaration as an international independent agency, headquarters in Montreal, Canada. Then it aims to have a collaborative worldwide movement for doping-free sport. Governance and funding are based on equal partnership between the sport movement and governments of the world. And there are certain initiatives, that is Global Anti-Doping Intelligence and Investigations Network. We have World Anti-Doping Code. All these are facts for your examination. Then next here is Borrowers Platform. Again, as far as International Monetary Fund is concerned, so basically they are the ones who are lending to countries who are facing economic crisis. So until now we had this whole collaboration and maybe a platform of creditors who are going to give money, but we did not had any platform for borrowers, because borrowers also need to have a platform so that they can discuss what are the challenges they are facing in their economy which has led to this debt situation. And this platform is a unique situation which has, or a solution which has been created for the very first time under the aegis of International Monetary Fund, where again all borrowers platform has been created. So what is exactly is this? So that a dedicated forum for peer learning, so that again countries who are facing debt crisis, they can understand what are the common challenges which they are facing, then again how they can manage their debt management capacity building, and strengthening borrower voices in sovereign debt negotiations. So until now we did not have a single platform where again all borrowers voices could be heard, and that was creating a problem with respect to getting funds from IMF, right? So that is what has come into picture. Again, it is not a debt restructuring forum. So member are 30 founding members, including India, and the chair of course here is Egypt as of now. Secretariat is UN Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and significance, it provides borrowers who have external debt reaching 11.7 trillion in 24. So a formal coordination mechanism. So all those borrowers who have read external debt reaching 11.7 trillion dollars. So sovereign debt, our coordination was a long dominated by creditor-led mechanisms like Paris Club, but now we have created borrowers platform as well with the name of this. Then gecko, again a species has been discovered in the northeastern region, and that is where this is very important for an examination. So again a new bent-toed gecko species with the name of Chytrodictys jayadityae has been discovered in Tripura. So this is how it looked like. It's basically kind of a reptile, right? So that's the basic facts about it. Kahan paya jata hai, right? And then with respect to gecko, it is small, mostly a nocturnal reptiles with a soft skin and large heads. It possesses adhesive toe pads and enabling wall ceiling climbing, typically insectivorous, and some adopt to human habits. Basic facts around this is very important because as it is a newly discovered species in the region of India. Then next we have World Economic Outlook. So there are many reports which will be coming up, and reports and indices are very important for your upcoming prelims examination. So World International Monetary Fund, IMF, has released a World Economic Outlook report recently, and this report has maybe strengthened India's GDP. That has been the major reason why it is in news. It has slightly upgraded India's GDP growth forecast to 6.5% in its latest report. Now it has also talked about that the global growth rate is going to slow down. In 2026, it is going to be somewhere around 3.1%, and it is of course going to be 3.2% in 2027. And India was maybe it has slipped out. Again, the top 5 economies on the domain of nominal GDP, we have been slipped out, and we are in the 6th economy as per the nominal GDP. Initially, we were in the top 5, and the first 5 countries are US, China, Germany, Japan, and the UK. So, World Economic Outlook, very important. It represents analysis and projections of world economy in the near and medium term. It is published twice a year, and updates in between. So there are many other reports which are released by International Monetary Fund, IMF. What are those? Number 1, Global Financial Stability Report, Fiscal Monitor. Basically, they are the ones who are helping countries in the situations whenever they are having an economic or balance of payment crisis majorly, and that's why IMF is very important. Then we have National Floor Level Minimum Wage. You must have been aware of situation in the Noida, where again employees have been protesting with respect to the wages, and that's why this National Floor Level Minimum Wage has been coming up into picture. So this minimum floor level minimum wage, it dates back to 1991 under the National Commission on Rural Labor, which was chaired by Shri Jina Bhai Darji, which has recommended that again voluntary basis as a step to move towards a uniform wage structure, and so that again the people specifically in the unorganized sectors, or maybe some people who are in the lower wage bracket, they should have a minimum floor wage as well, right? So currently we have of course the Code on Wages 2019, which is empowering center to fix a floor wage, and hence government, center and state both should fix a minimum wage above this level based on skills, areas, occupation, and other factors. Initially, it was 20 rupees in 1991. Now, by 2017, it has been increased to 176. But now, there has been a very important protest, or very major protest, which has talked about that again, we need to have a national floor level minimum wage as of now. Then lastly, we have Khasi and Garo languages. So again, Khasi, Garo, Jaintia, all these hills are, maybe you must have read that in your northeastern states wale region mein. So Meghalaya has announced that the indigenous Khasis and Garo languages as their official languages of state in addition to English. So of course, if they are added as official languages, they can be used in the respective state legislative assemblies and state communications. So these languages can now be used in government communications, and once necessary constitutional amendments are being made to relevant acts of state, sorry, not constitutional amendment, but again certain amendments to the state legislatures act. So this is where now they will be able to speak and debate in their assembly in these languages. So about these basic languages, what are those? So basically Khasi is a member of Khasian branch of Mon Khmer family, which is part of Austroasiatic stock. And then Garo is important language of Garo Hills district, belongs to one of the Bodo language groups of Sino-Tibetan languages. They are not a part of the languages mentioned in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Basic facts, very important for an examination. That's how we come to an end of this news today discussion. All important questions which could be framed from the topic which I have discussed will pop up in your screen. Please solve those questions. That's how you're going to get confidence that how exactly questions will be coming up from the topics which I have learned. Lastly, we have digital current affairs platform, which is of course a one-stop solution for all your current affairs issues. Please go and navigate the website. It is certainly going to help you a lot in terms of your current affairs preparation for the examination. Thank you so very much and all the very best.